Okay, please repeat. By the influence of the autumn season, all the cows, doe, women, and female birds became fertile and were followed by their respective mates in search of sexual enjoyment. Just as activities performed for the service of the Supreme Lord are automatically followed by beneficial results. Purport. Srila Prabhupada comments. On the arrival of the autumn season, all the cows, deer, birds, and females in general become pregnant, because in this season, generally all the husbands become impelled by sex desire. This is exactly like the transcendentalists, who by the grace of the Supreme Lord are bestowed with the benediction of their destinations in life. Srila Rupa Goswami has instructed in his Upadeshamrita that one should perform devotional service with great enthusiasm, patience, and conviction, and should follow the rules and regulations, keep oneself clean from material contamination, and stay in the association of devotees. By following these principles, one is sure to achieve the desired result of devotional service. For he who patiently follows the regular principles of devotional service, the time will come when he will achieve the results, as the wives reap results by becoming pregnant. Gavo mriga kaja narya pushpinya sharada bhavan anviyamana swavirshai falayar isha kriya eva. Translation. By the influence of the autumn season, all the cows, doe, women, and female birds became fertile and were followed by their respective mates in search of sexual enjoyment. Just as activities performed for the service of the Lord are automatically followed by all beneficial results. Om Gyanatimarandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umlitam Gena Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha. It's one of the most unusual analogies that I've come across. So this kind of natural progression, of what takes place between the male and female, and the autumn season, I guess, is considered a very romantic time, essentially. So the females become pregnant. So the analogy is that if we, and the women, the females don't really have to do much. They just kind of follow the process of being a mate to the male. And so if we simply engage in devotional service very sincerely, following the instructions, in this instance, Prabhupada gives the reference of Rupa Goswami's, the third text to Upadeshamrita, which is gives a very powerful understanding of how to execute devotional service. So let's focus on that that sloka. Utsahan nishchaya daryat tat tat karma pravartanat. Sangha chagat sato vritte sadbir bhakti prasiddhiti. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his commentary on Upadeshamrita, he says the first half, which is this triad of Utsahan Nishchayat Dharyat, that these comprise the attitudes that a devotee should have. And then the last half, which is the tat karma pravartanat sangat jagat sato vite, how we should live our lives. So this attitude, what does attitude mean? I looked up in the dictionary. It's a settled way of thinking, kind of like a mood. So this triad of success, if we have this attitude, and Prabhupada mentioned this a couple times, but it's a very significant point. In the preface, he says that advancement in Krishna consciousness is dependent upon the attitude of the practitioner. So it has an enormous bearing on this, on our spiritual development. The process that we have is quite different. The process of bhakti, pure bhakti, it's quite different than that of the Astanga yogi or the impersonalist. They're all kind of in the mood of being a little bit the controller, just push around the material energy, do this asana, do that asana, do this kind of fasting, do this and that. And whereas the impersonalist, all this heavy-duty austerity. And but for a devotee, really what it involves is that we just take shelter of Krishna. We do everything we can to enter into his internal energy. And so it's not a controller mood, it's more of like a humble servant mentality that allows us to advance in bhakti. So then, I guess okay, so let me give the translation of that third text. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of devotional service. First one is being enthusiastic, utsahan, endeavoring with confidence, and that's nishchayat, and then dharyat, being patient. Okay, so those are the 3 components of attitude. So we'll explore these a little bit more. And then living our lives, we're acting according to the regulative principles. And then Prabhupada, he cites 7.5.23, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasham Sakyam Atmanivedanam. So, and then abandoning the association of non-devotees, that's Sangha Tyagat and Sato Vite, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. There's an interesting reference. This is from Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Sanatana Goswami, that it's text, it's Madhya 2283. What's that noise? Is that feedback? Oh, okay. Couldn't figure out what that was. Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Hoya Sarusanga. Krishna Prema Janme Tenho Puna Mukhya Anga. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna's association with advanced devotees. And even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. So that's a real key, to have the right attitude and to get these 3 things in place. This enthusiasm and endeavoring with confidence, or as Prabhupada in his commentary in Krishna book, he uses he says conviction. So endeavoring with confidence or conviction. It's like faith. And then being patient. Okay, so I'll give you an example of how the association of an advanced devotee helped me with enthusiasm. And this was my second day out on Sankirtan. My first day was a Saturday night, and Naranjana Das Brahmachari, who's now Janamashtami, took me out. He was in charge of a little center in Hartford, Connecticut, where new bhaktas from the New York Temple and the Boston Temple were sent to be trained up on Sankirtan. So Narendra Swami took me to this little parking lot, and I was equipped with a brown supermarket bag, just like a regular brown fold-up bag, and it had BTGs in it, and I had American flags and a toothpick. Okay, one flag per toothpick. Okay, and so the strategy was to go up and offer them a flag, ask them for a donation. I can't remember what we were asking for the donation for. Maybe it was Food for Life. And then if they gave a donation, we give them back to Godhead Magazine. So I was out for a couple hours, and I was, somehow or other, I was just in ecstasy. I was running all over the lot. Narendra Swami, like 35, 40 years later, would joke with me about Janamashtami. I remember the first day you went on Sankirtan. So I was just so fired up, and I think I collected right around $100. My first day, a couple hours or an hour and a half, something like that. This was just in November, just before. Yeah, it was the end of November, about this time of year, maybe a little bit later. And okay, so then that was my first experience, and then the next day was Sunday, and we had a Sunday feast. And as a new bhakta, I probably ate 2 big plates of halava, before taking rest. So naturally, in the morning, I had the sugar blues. It was a little. So that was then Brigupati, who's still doing book distribution. He's in LA. He took me out for the second, this is my second time out. So he, we came to a lot, and he said, okay, back to Jim. This is where you'll distribute. And I just confessed to him, I said, I don't feel like it. I just, ugh. So then he relayed a story, a pastime in his own life. He was on the Radha Damodar bus party, and he had a similar kind of mood one day. And Vishnu Jan Swami gave him some advice. He said, now, Brigupati, you may not feel fired up now, but you remember what it was like when you were fired up. Of course, that's American colloquialism, ISKCON colloquialism for being enthusiastic. So he said, you remember what it was like when you were fired up. So just act like you're fired up, remember that mood, and then Krishna will see you're trying, and then he'll make you fired up. So, I said, okay, well, let me try it. So I got out there, and I remembered what it was like on Saturday night. So I started running around, giving people their flag on a toothpick, and sure enough, within a few minutes, I was genuinely fired up. And it was a principle, and I kind of would convey it to, because I would train devotees in book distribution over the years, and I would say it's like a mental switch that you throw in your mind, that turns on, the enthusiasm switch. And then when Krishna sees that you're sincerely trying, then he'll, give you all this ecstatic enthusiasm. So, association with devotees. Okay, so that's one example, about enthusiasm. But what is it that stops us from being enthusiastic? I mean, why wasn't Arjuna enthusiastic to fight? And he exclaimed, let's see, is it Bhagavad Gita 6:34? He explained to Krishna, Anybody know the verse? Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavadridam tashaham nigraham manye vayor eva saduskuram. So the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. And wind's pretty tough anyway. So Krishna accepted, yeah, no doubt it's difficult to control the wind, the mind, but by constant practice and detachment, you can do that. Okay, so when we look at in the other items, the other three members of the triad, conviction, to a large extent, it's a mental thing. Our mind can derail us, can come up with all these reasons not to have faith. There was one devotee that was a new bhakta when I was Sankirtan leader for Krishna Fest in, 1991. And joined very young. I think he started practicing when he was about 14 or 15. And he was about like 18 when I was there. But then later in life, his mind derailed him. He had this big faith crisis, and he just couldn't overcome it. A real smart guy. And I was recently dealing with him in Alachua. So the mind. Okay, then patience. And now what are we talking about when we talk about patience? Well, one thing is that we have to be patient with Krishna in terms of patient with ourselves in terms of anartha nivritti. Has anybody here that's hearing this, have they recognized within their hearts any anarthas? Okay, why don't they just immediately go? It's really, again, going back to the process, we're not the controller. We take shelter of Krishna's internal energy. He can relieve us from the anarthas when it's the right time, when he deems it, that you're ready for this. Otherwise, we have to go through the suffering that material energy brings our way, so that we'll get fed up with trying to enjoy separately from him. Does that make sense? So also patience when the trials and tribulations come our way. And sometimes they can go for an extended period of time. And to persevere, during those times of tribulations. The mind may say, well, Krishna, if you're really God, why are you putting me through all of this? So patience with the process. This is also connected with faith. Conviction, enthusiasm. When we look at the qualification for advancing in Krishna consciousness, according to Rupa Goswami, is faith in and knowledge of Shastra. Those two things. Interesting. That's our qualification for advancing, our qualification for no longer being controlled by our minds, by entering deeper and deeper into the internal energy of the Lord. Of course, faith in knowledge of and faith in Shastra. Shastra basically presents Krishna consciousness, presents the process. So if we're very, very, if our faith is deep, obviously our enthusiasm level will be very high all the time, because my life is meant to serve Krishna. I mean his eternal servant. This is my natural position. I want to go there. So devotees, when they really understand that, they don't want to waste a second of their lives. They want to do everything possible to enter into the internal energy and connect with Krishna in a very profound way. So therefore the enthusiasm, no matter what. Prabhupada was just so enthusiastic, even when he came to America, he had, how many rupees was it that he had? 20 rupees? Huh? 40, that's right, 40 rupees, thank you. He sold his little Bhagavatam set to Captain Pandya, the captain of the Jaladuta, so he got $20 for that, I believe. But the 40 rupees he couldn't exchange. So he had 20 bucks in his hand. No one really knew him. He had the trunks of books, and then he went to Pennsylvania and spent time with that family. And then he goes to New York. I mean, so many tribulations. His translation of Gita was stolen. My God, just think of the tribulations. He was writing to his godbrothers, writing to these wealthy people in India, wanting to get help. No one would help him, but he persevered. He was so enthusiastic. And then some hippies started coming around. I mean, Prabhupada, he's coming from Vrindavan. Why would he want to associate with such strange-looking people with such strange habits? But they were interested, so he just persevered, was so enthusiastic, gave them so much love and care, and they became devotees. But his faith was just so profound. And as we know, the gradations of Kanishta to Madhyama to Uttama, it's faith-based and also Shastra knowledge-based. This is the qualification for advancing. Technically, so that's qualification, and there's actual, the features of each level. But Prabhupada oftentimes, except in one purport, put them together. So the actual levels of advancements are based upon love and attachment for Krishna. Kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but at least we understand that this faith is a big factor. But where does it come from? When we see advanced devotees and get their association and experience their ecstasy. I mean, how many of you have had a conversation with a sannyasi and walked away with your head spinning in transcendental bliss? So you know that what he's doing is what I should be doing. He's taking the process seriously. If I take it seriously, I'll eventually get there, right? So therefore, this is. But on the other hand, if we want to reduce our faith, if we want to reduce our enthusiasm, of course we don't want to do that, but it will happen automatically if we hang out with materialistic people, or people that criticize devotees, or criticize the movement, criticize Shastra. We may not realize that that's what's going to be the result, but that's what happens. That's a profound impact. And it's something that may come out later. So we have to be very careful to who we associate with. That's the discrimination that's required, and the Madhyama Vaishnava has that for his own spiritual development. It's not that we don't try to help materialistic people, or devotees that are less advanced and may not have respectful attitudes, may be critical, but we always are trying to guide them to a higher platform of consciousness. So this faith, it's the kind of underlying foundation, and faith also is equated to taste, an attraction for Krishna. When we have that attraction, then there's faith. And where does that come from? Okay, association of devotees. But when we start hearing, it's not that we're the impersonalists, they do their detachment, just stopping their senses, and it doesn't work. Whereas devotees, they engage in the 9 processes of devotion, and then they get this attraction. And so that attraction, and kind of non-different than the faith, but it bolsters faith when we get the taste and the attraction. Then our enthusiasm levels go up, our ability to persevere, to be patient with challenges, be patient with ourselves, because we know the process is going to work. It's going to ultimately will come out the other side. This is the females that are mentioned in the verse, they get their baby. So we get our bundle of prema, a little baby of prema. That comes by seriously following the process. And in one sense, these are things that all of us know, but to really put this in focus, that these 3 things will enable us to be successful in bhakti. Utsahan nishchaya daryat. And how to have that constantly there and always increasing. And we look, devotees that are very enthusiastic, they're effulgent. They're running around doing this, they're super busy. And then devotees that aren't so enthusiastic, they're kind of down. They're not getting the ecstasy. So we can see many examples of how it does work. And then we see examples of how it doesn't work. And these kind of observations, and that we do it in a critical way, but so that we can actually understand how the process is empowered. So it's attitude. Attitude is really the key factor. And these 3 deal with attitude. And then we live our life governed by these attitudes. The 9 angas of bhakti we just fully go into. Okay. So, any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I was wondering, when you were describing the nature of spiritual progress and how Arjuna has this doubt about being able to control the mind. And I was thinking about how the mind's role in the material world is to project desires, like I like this, I don't like this, and therefore we pursue those desires. And at the same time, the soul also has its own desires, right? So when the soul says I desire or I want to serve Krishna, right? Could it be possible that that desire is still coming from the conditioning of the mind and maybe not the soul? Or is any desire that's spiritual in nature is essentially coming from the soul?
Well, if we're chanting really good rounds, we're asking Krishna to engage us in service, then the mind's greatly purified. Of course, from the very beginning of my devotional service, there was a big experiment that was taking place in the New York temple when I joined. Your spiritual master was the temple president, and he was Ramapad Das Brahmachari. Right? Yeah. Okay. So they were doing a big experiment. They imported the Bhakta program from the LA temple. Urjasvat was Dhanavir Goswami's assistant, and so he became the Bhakta leader in New York. And one of the things that they kept, it was a little bit like being in boot camp. It was quite strict, but one of the points that was kept being drilled home was that you do what your authority tells you to do. Like follow authority. So tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam ganinas tattvadarshana. So you try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master, acquire from him submissively and render service to him. Self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you. So that's submissive inquiry, but then also there's a whole mood of service. It's also one of humility. It's not like I know what's right, and there's a dialogue that may take place. I get this idea about service, so then I consult with my spiritual master or ISKCON authorities and kind of fine tune it. It's not that we just do everything on our own inspiration, because it may not be what's in the best interest of our own development. As one advances, then there's much more clarity and much more connection between thought processes, because they've been very much purified and what's favorable for our devotion. But for the most part, in the beginning, a lot of this guyam akyati prichati, this revealing one's mind and inquiring confidentially, has this important part of it. Then we don't get off track. And the reason that Bhakti program was started in New York, because no one was trained. Everyone just kind of off on their own, doing their own thing, kind of. So they wanted to have more like ability to guide people, the leadership, and that's what kind of came from that. It's not that we ignore our inspirations, but at least that we should consult. And a lot of times what I've found is that through the process of consultation, then it's an upward spiral of an understanding of how to move it ahead, a particular inspiration. You talk about it, and then you get feedback from the other person has ideas, you got ideas, and then so it's a collaborative effort. And that was Prabhupada's primary formula. One of his last instructions before he left was that you can show your love for me by how well you cooperate to keep this institution intact. So that means collaboration. We may not all agree, but then if we collaborate, then a synthesis can be established of how we can best serve the mission. But what I think the underlying principle of our attitude is good, is in line with Utsahan Nishchaya Daryat. We're really pursuing our devotional service in this mood. It allows us to enter into the internal energy. And that's the whole idea. That's where we're going. We accept that those things are favorable, reject those that are unfavorable. And we're serious about our sadhana practices. And then we can enter into the internal energy, and then that's where the empowerment comes from, for day-to-day service, our lifelong service to the movement. And we see that with Prabhupada. There was one, Krishna, let's see, there was a Mataji that went and interviewed all of these personalities that knew Srila Prabhupada before he came to the West, and she published a book. What was it?
Her name was Mula Prakriti, and the book was called A Friend to Everyone.
Yeah, right. Mula Prakriti published this book called A Friend to Everyone. And this was interviews that she'd conducted of different people that knew Prabhupada before he came to the West. And she interviewed this Pujari who was born in Radhakund, And he was serving in a temple right next to the Radha Damodar temple. And on several occasions, he was awoken in the middle of the night by this cry. It was like, I couldn't really figure out what it was. So then he went on to the rooftop of the temple that he was pujari in, and he saw Srila Prabhupada in the middle of the night crying to the holy name. It was so intense, his sadhana. And so what he did, the next day he went and started serving Prabhupada. As you could just see, the level of sincerity was so deep. Started, I think, doing his laundry and kind of his, keeping people away that would disturb him from his translating work. So that really is the source of empowerment. And interestingly enough, here we go back to book distribution. In 1975, it's something that I often bring up because it's something that really, another instruction that kind of changed my life and the lives of many devotees. In 1975, Srila Prabhupada was in the Atlanta temple, and book distributors from all over North America convened on Atlanta to get Prabhupada's darshan. So he had a meeting just with the book distributors, and they were all sitting there so enthusiastic and interested in hearing what Prabhupada would say. And then Srivas Prabhu, who's the temple president, I think he's the longest tenured temple president in ISKCON's history. He took over, I think in 1987, the LA temple, and here it is, now we're almost 2020. So, 33 years. And, and so Srivas asked Srila Prabhupada, how can we increase our desire to distribute your books? So then Prabhupada went into a prolonged kind of meditative silence. And then he looked up at the ceiling and said, if you really want to increase book distribution, he said it 3 times, then you will chant all your rounds without stopping. And he said that 3 times. And so when I joined the movement in 77, there was about 40 brahmacharis in the Sankirtan department, and about maybe 25 or 30 ladies. And every single one of us had to get up at 2 a.m. because that facilitated our chanting all of our rounds. And Srivas is still doing that. And it gives him tremendous power, because we're just tapping into what empowers devotees, the holy name. We're asking Krishna for service when we chant. If we chant very sincerely, as Prabhupada did in the, into Radha Damodar temple, then we'll get the service. We'll get inspiration, we'll know how to do it, we'll get the intelligence to execute it. That's how it works. That's my understanding. I've tried to follow that, it's tough sometimes, but I got up at 2:15 this morning, but not too bad. But it really helps. The Brahma Muhurta is a very powerful time. And, so this is the main anga, hearing and chanting, those 2, Shravanam, Kirtanam. So if we can really focus on our japa, then incredible empowerment, incredible intelligence will come service-wise. That's the main way. And then Guyam Makyati Prichati. We won't be, if we're sincerely chanting, asking Krishna to engage us in our service. So our main motive in life is to please Him. If we're not chanting so well, then there will start, the mind, this will please me. Kind of gets inverted. Does that make sense? Anybody else? Hare Krishna. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you.